Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, absolutely gorgeous neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in this mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on GoodPod, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, CastBox, Player FM, Audible, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two really wonderful guests for you today. First up, Natasha Tripplett is here to celebrate Planted with Love. Later in the show, we'll be taking a listen back to a conversation we had with foster care expert Dr. John DeGarmo. Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures, delightful children's book written by Helen Rogerson. Woofy awakens suddenly to a feeling that his friend Bun needs him. When he arrives at the place his nose leads him, Woofy is confused and doesn't find Bun right away. Then a shout from above leads to an amazing experience as he puts his paleontology skills to work. Together, he, Bun, and a cat that hangs around the site wrap up a wonderful adventure involving a T-Rex skull and a very cool twist of an ending. The story is told in a lyrical style that incorporates actual fossil hunting concepts and vocabulary. If you like dinosaurs, friends who help, and adventures, you will love this book. You can check out Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures and all the Woofy books at unpackyourownhappy.com. Join us right now from the beautiful state of California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new picture book. It's called Planted with Love. Please welcome to the show, Natasha Tripplett. Natasha, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here. It's a lovely day. The sun is out. I know other parts of the country are freezing right now, but I'm fortunate. Like you said, I'm in California, so the sun's out and my mood is as bright as the day.
That is awesome. Yes, my hair, you can't see it on the podcast. My hair is a bit askew because I was out shoveling, and I was pretty cold when I came in, and I said, I don't care what my head looks like. We're just going to get warm here. And I'm really glad that obviously you were safe and hopefully not affected by the fires.
Yeah, this is a really weird time regarding climate. But yeah, there were, as many of you know, a ton of fires in the Los Angeles area. I'm actually in Northern California, which is about 5 hours. Just before you get into LA, I would have to drive 5 hours. But my husband is from LA and his family is all there. And we are very fortunate that they are all unscathed. I did have an aunt who lost power. That was the extent of her issues. And I also had a cousin who ended up having to evacuate. She was in the Pasadena area and she ended up having to evacuate, but their home was also safe.
So it's obvious that family is important to you, and I think Planted with Love, it's a story about family.
It definitely is. It's a story about a little boy who's experienced a lot in his young age. He has grown up in foster care for reasons that aren't mentioned in the story, but we get the idea that he's had to start over many, many times, which has caused him a lot of emotions that are difficult for him. So the story takes us through his journey of being with a new foster family.
It's heartbreaking that there are so many kids in the foster care system. I did a little research. We've talked about the subject a lot here on the podcast. The best research I could find is telling me that there's 370,000 kids in foster care now, which is just a horrific number to think about. And the fact is that so many of those kids are moved from house to house to house very often, oftentimes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times.
Yeah, and my background is I was an adoption foster care social worker. And so I worked one-on-one with a lot of these children for a number of years. And they have had to have like this hard exterior just to be able to get through and get to through the next day, because they don't know what's coming. And so they have this posture of bracing themselves, because it's hard to relax when you don't know if you will have permanency or what that will look like. And then a lot of these kids are still desiring to go back and live with their first families. And so when you have a population like this who have so many big emotions and so many big things that happen in their life at a very young age, you want to just give them something that will let them know that they're seen, that they're valued, that even when they display bad behaviors, they are still worthy of love. And so I wrote this book because I wanted children to know that, they too are worth being reflected in a story.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you were a social worker working with kids. Before I became an educational magician, now we're talking 4 decades ago, I was a social worker in the juvenile justice system, and I worked for an agency that dealt not only with kids in the juvenile justice system, but also kids in the foster care system. My caseload was never more than 6 kids. We were brought in to deal with the quote unquote, the kids with the biggest issues and, trying to help them get back into the community. The social workers dealing with the foster kids had caseloads of 80 to 90 to more kids. I'm hoping that that's changed a whole lot these days.
Yeah, and well, there is a lot of kids that, need to have somebody who's on their side. And I think it would depend on, some of the scope of work of each social worker, because you have some social workers whose job is, basically working hand in hand with CPS, and their caseload can get very, very high because they're investigating abuse and neglect calls. And there's not enough people who are willing to do that. The burnout rate is really, really high. So those caseloads can get very high. I was very fortunate in that my caseload was probably more about 20, which is still may seem high, but I was doing direct service and counseling with the kids and preparing kids to go into placement, and then after they were placed to continue doing therapy with them and the families. I did a lot of attachment and bonding therapy and whatever the kids needed. But I was in these kids' lives for a long time versus a caseworker who has, removed kids. They may be in the children's lives for a shorter period of time, and thus the reason why they have so many kids on their caseload.
Was there one incident, one kid that motivated you to write Planted with Love?
Well, it's really interesting. There was, but it wasn't a kid who was on my caseload, believe it or not. So I was adopted when I was 3 months old, and I grew up in a pastor's family in Canada on Vancouver Island. And while there, my father, he had a church, and there was a family in the church who was fostering a little girl, and they could no longer care for her. They're like, we need help. And so they asked my parents if we could provide maybe like respite care for like a week or so, just to give them a break so that they could, breathe again. And this little girl, she was 3 years older than me, and she had come from a very rough background. We were her 7th placement. And so what started out as like a week of respite turned into 8 years, and she became my sister. She wasn't formally adopted, but she lived with us for 8 years and was part of our family in every sense of the word. And so her story is really what motivated a lot of what I wrote in this story.
Well, what a beautiful family. Your adoptive parents. I just love hearing those stories, because like I said, there are so many kids out there that need a forever home, and that your family would give you and your sister a forever home is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that is a challenge with, I think, that adoptive parents face today is that there just really isn't enough resources to really help prepare them for the levels of trauma and the levels of pain that the kids who are coming to them are experiencing. A lot of times they believe that, oh, I have a home, I have an extra bed, I can be that person who can help this child. And yes, but it takes so much more. I remember when I was doing home studies, I used to write home studies for families who were desiring to adopt. And it was really striking to me that people were hesitant to do the work on themselves and their own motivation for wanting to take in a child, and not really understanding that the way they view the world could really impact for good or for negative a child who's experienced so much trauma and pain coming into their home. So we have a lot of work to do in this area to really support families who are adopting and fostering.
Could you expand on that idea a little bit more about the way a family looks at the world could negatively or positively affect their adopted kid?
Yeah, sure. Of course. So one of the things, this is just a simple classic example. You have a child who comes in who's experienced a lot of trauma. And let's say maybe you have another kid who was your biological kid in the home. Your biological kid may understand that, there are certain rules we abide by in this home. And when we break those rules, there are punishments that happen. And so a parent who grew up in an environment where they saw things as pretty black and white, that their worldview was wrong is punished and right is celebrated. That type of parenting could severely negatively impact a child who's come from trauma, because a lot of these kids, if they have attachment issues, they don't believe that they may be either worthy of the love. And so that type of approach will perpetuate the negative behaviors that they don't want. And then it will cause further separation. What would be a better approach is to address the underlying needs that the child is displaying and not the behaviors that are symptomatic of what is either lacking or what is desired from that child in that moment. So one of the things I would tell families is if your child does something that you would typically tell your other biological child to go to their room for, I would say do not separate your child who's experienced trauma and tell them to go to their room, because that is a place where they're already having a hard time regulating their own feelings. So they need an adult to help regulate their feelings for them. Another example that I used to say is, don't let your child be the thermometer. You need to be the thermostat. I used to tell families this. So you need to set the tone. So when your child is up and down, you don't go up and down with them. You set the tone and you bring them to where you are, which means a lot of time there's going to be like, you need to sit your child on your lap. It's way more time intensive, because you're not just dealing with the behaviors, but you're dealing with the underlying need that is causing the child to respond the way they are.
Well, I think that's great advice for any parent, for any teacher, to be that thermostat, to set the temperature, as opposed to reacting to the temperature swings that your kids might be experiencing, whether they're foster kids or not. Was it difficult for you to share this book and your sister's story, in some ways your story?
No, it wasn't difficult. The book is definitely informed by some of the things that my sister went through, and some of the things that I saw while doing direct practice with kids, but it's no one person's story. And I think that when we have enough where we can pull from lots of different stories and make a really robust story that can help touch on a lot of issues for kids and families, it is enriching, and I feel empowered and privileged to be able to share those stories. And so it wasn't difficult, because I see this as providing kind of a light for children who just maybe need to be seen.
Obviously, as you alluded to earlier on, this Planted with Love would be a wonderful book for a kid who is in the foster care system to see themselves reflected positively in the page of the books, to give them hope that maybe this foster home is their forever home, or that they'll find one soon. But I think it's equally, if not more important, for other kids who aren't in the foster care system, kids who haven't been adopted, to experience this book, so that we can have conversations with our kids about this fact. Kids should know that not every kid has a forever home, and some of the kids in their school, in their classes, may be in this foster care situation, and they deserve our empathy.
Definitely. And I would even take it one step further. And I think on some level, every one of us have experienced situations where we don't feel like we belong, and we feel displaced for whatever reasons. It could be, a kid starting over at a new school, or parents starting over at a new job, whatever it is, or even losing somebody close to you. We've all been in that situation where things just don't quite feel right. And I think this book could also address that, because not everyone always feels like they're where they should be, or they don't always feel comfortable stepping out of their comfort zone. And so this book addresses all of that as well, and can be a useful tool, like you said, to provide empathy, but even through being able to relate to some of the feelings that the little boy in the book expresses.
How can we, as parents, as friends, how can our kids as friends be that person that helps someone who doesn't feel like they fit in feel better about it, feel like they do fit in better?
Yeah, and that's such a big question. On a child to child peer level, I work in a classroom as well, and I always tell my students to find that person who may be sitting by themselves, or who may be alone, or who might need help, who's fallen, hurt themselves, whatever that the situation is, and be with them, comfort them, walk them to the office, make sure that they don't physically feel like they're by themselves, because there's a level of anxiety that accompanies that, right? As far as a parent or an educator, it's good to be aware of who is in your surroundings and knowing what their stories are, so that you can, in a way, address them without pointing things out. So like being aware if a kid has had, a traumatic move from home to home, then you might not, as an educator, want to assign something that glorifies what the home life is. So that's one way that an educator could step in. And I think as an adult, whether it's a trusted friend or even a foster parent, I would say number one is letting the child know that while they can't control the future, like one of the things that, concerns me is when parents want to promise a kid, oh, everything will be okay now. A parent doesn't know that. They don't know what okay even means to the child who's with them. So, because okay to them might be, oh, I get to go back with my biological parents and family. So you can't promise that, but what you can promise is that they won't be going through anything alone, that you will be there with them, that you will address the need, the emotion. And it goes a long way to actually just sit with and comfort without even having to provide a whole lot of words, but letting that child release those emotions and acknowledging that you see them.
I think that's incredible advice. One of the things you said earlier, and you just alluded to it in your last answer, was that there are so many kids who are in foster care who may be there because of abuse and trauma that they experienced with their biological family, want to go back to that biological family, and that's their dream. That's their number one dream. Can you explain that to somebody who's sitting back and thinking, why would you want to go back to somebody who hurt you so much?
Yeah, absolutely. There's this strange thing that, when babies are in utero, the mother is the one that they connect and bond with, and they're forever searching for that. Kids who are removed as babies from their biological parents, they're searching for that familiarity. And part of what some kids feel is a known existence, something that they're familiar with, that connection supersedes what they experience in that home. And so the other thing is we have to also realize that when a child is removed, they're not just removed from their immediate family where they may have experienced the abuse and trauma, but they're removed from a whole community. They're removed from extended family. They're removed from grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. They're removed from maybe the church that they go to, maybe their neighborhood. They're also removed from the kids that they played with at the park. Like, removing a child because of abuse and neglect, we have to have these systems in our country to keep kids safe, but we shouldn't just think of it as removing from parents who maybe, need a little extra help to get their feet back on the ground so that they can respond a different way. But we're also removing kids from their entire life. And that's something that should be considered with great weight that we don't always think about when we think, oh, why would a kid want to go back? A lot of kids also will make an excuse for why their parents may have done something, which is just a natural developmental thing that kids do. They want to rationalize. A lot of kids blame themselves, which is not good, but it is developmentally appropriate for kids who see themselves as the center of their own world. But I think when we need to have a little bit more compassion when thinking about why a kid would want to go back to their life, their community, their world, when we are thinking about the abuse and neglect.
Mm-hmm. That's something that I hadn't considered, and it makes a lot of sense. Not every parent or every person is able to become a foster parent or an adoptive parent, but I think every person is able to support a child who's in the foster care system or a family that has brought a foster kid into their home or adopted a kid. How are some of the ways that we can help our neighbors who are involved in foster care?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There are so many programs out there that are formally constructed to help people influence kids who maybe need that extra care. There's CASAs, guardian ad litems, where you're actually an advocate for a child who may be experiencing having to go through the legal system. There's mentoring programs. There's Big Brothers programs. And then there's just the informal, hey, there's a family, maybe it's a next door neighbor and you want to do something special for them. Playing outside, throwing the ball, going to that child's football game or dance recital or theater production, just showing ways that you are there and willing to show up and support somebody. I've seen programs where kids who don't have, say, a dad who is available in the home, other men will step up, and if there's some event at school, they'll show up for that child. There's so many informal ways to just support and let somebody know that they are worthy and valued and worth being celebrated that we can engage in.
I love that, and I can say from experience that being involved in a child's life is very obviously it helps the child, but it's very rewarding for us who get involved. I think anytime we extend ourselves in love, it's a blessing to both people. I'm delighted that Planted with Love is available for families. What else are you working on? What kind of books are you looking to put out there in the world?
Yeah, so I love writing books that really point to just like a slice of life that people may not be familiar with, like foster care. I have another book coming out in the fall in September called Downtown Doors, and it is about a little boy and his mother who take this very familiar weekly walk through their city, and they pass all these familiar people in their community, and they end up, one of the people that they pass is a homeless man, and the story brings them to a food pantry, and you get the sense that, oh, this is a family that needs to be blessed by this food pantry, and they come here every week. And what I wanted to do is, I live near Oakland, California, and the unhoused population here is very vast. And it can be disheartening just driving down the street and seeing all these people who can't afford to live and have shelter the same way that many of us can. And it's a daunting reality. And I was thinking, man, if I am feeling this way, what are kids feeling when they're looking at this? And I had a conversation with my own children, and a lot of them, they feel hopeless. And so I wanted to write something that would inspire kids to know that they can have an impact no matter what their place in life is. And so this little boy and his mother, they get what they need from the food pantry. And then on their walk home, the little boy thinks about everybody who's influenced him. And then he gives to the unhoused man in his neighborhood some of what they've received at the food pantry. And so it's just a way to let us know that we all can make a difference in somebody's life and what it really means to be a community and care for those who we call our neighbors.
What, you have an open invitation to return to celebrate that book.
Yay.
Meantime, where can people go to find out more about Planted with Love and find out more about Natasha Tripplett?
Yeah, I would love it if people would come to my website, natashabooks.com. They can also find me on Instagram, Natasha_stories. There I post lots of different things about different events coming up that I'm involved with. And also my other books are there. I have a book called Juneteenth Is that celebrates the Juneteenth holiday from one family's perspective. It's a very fun book that has a lot of hope to it. And then I also have another book called The Blue Pickup, which is a story about an actual truck that I own that I received from my grandfather. And the story is set in Jamaica, where my family is from, where my biological family is from. And all of the characters in that book are named after my Jamaican family relatives. So they can find all sorts of stuff about me on my website or on Instagram.
We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of Planted with Love. It's a new picture book from our guest, Natasha Tripplett. Natasha, thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Marie Nichols was recently on my Connecticut Book Festival's podcast, and what a delightful woman. One of the things she said really struck home with me. She said, parents nurture with care, siblings are taught to share, but grandparents embrace the dares. We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest is a colorful, fun-filled book where this grandmother dares to embark on a wild journey with her grandson into the dinosaur forest. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on bookshop.org. You and your kids and you and your grandkids are going to love this book. It's We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Please welcome back to the show, Dr. John DeGarmo. Dr. John, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
Super to have you back. Really looking forward to talking about this because you are a foster care expert. You're devoted. You've been a foster parent to, what is it, 24 foster kids?
Maybe about 60 kids, maybe.
Okay, so a little bit more than 24.
Yeah.
But in our past conversations, you really opened up my eyes to some of the issues around foster care and how we can help, even if we're not the foster parents, how we can help foster kids. And I've mentioned on the show, we've had a new foster niece come into our life probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, and she has absolutely changed my life. She is someone who is incredibly dear to me, and I'm so happy to have her in my life. And I think, maybe part of the reason I was so willing to open up my heart to her was some of the conversations that we've had. So I'm really excited to get back. And why don't we just start by talking about what it is that drew you to foster care and how it changed your life?
Oh, thank you. It has changed my life. Absolutely. In so many ways. I think I told you before, I never really intended to be a foster parent. I never had any thoughts about it. I did have thoughts about it. I had negative misconceptions about foster care, as I think many people do in society. I thought the kids were bad kids and that foster parents were kind of weird. Well, that last part's true. Foster parents are a little bit weird. It's really a different lifestyle that most don't understand. The kids are just children who are victims of abuse or victims of neglect or victims of abandonment. They're just simply kids who want someone to help them and to love them. And foster parenting is something that is a very different type, as I said earlier, very different type of lifestyle. I did it. My wife and I got into it because it wasn't until after the death of my first child that I really recognized the miracle of life, if you will. And when I was teaching years ago in a rural high school setting, I noticed a lot of kids in my own classroom that were suffering from poor attendance, and I kept wondering what's going on here. And then I noticed that it was due to, for many kids, parental involvement and the environment they came from. And so that led my wife and I to becoming foster parents to over 60 kids over the past 16 years. And since this is National Adoption Month, I have been blessed to adopt 3 of those children from foster care.
It really is an amazing gift, an amazing, I was going to say sacrifice, and it is a sacrifice in some ways, but I think
it is.
You've told me that you get so much more out of it.
I do, absolutely. But, you're right, it is a sacrifice because a foster parent doesn't lead a normal lifestyle. When these children come into our home, when they're placed into our home and our family, as foster parents, we are in charge of them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that does not mean that my wife and I can just shoot off to the movies or go shopping or out to dinner on a whim or even get a babysitter. We are in charge of with these children who are coming with a number of different anxieties and are facing lots of trauma. So, it's a really different type of, every day is a unique adventure and challenge. But at the same time, it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I firmly believe that every child that has come through my home has made me a better person in some way.
Well, I certainly can attest to that. I think our foster niece has helped me grow in so many ways. And one of the things that you kind of opened my eyes to in the times that we've talked in the past is that being a foster parent isn't for everybody, but everybody can help and support a foster parent, foster family. And what you just mentioned, it's your wife and you just can't run out to the movies and call up the typical babysitter so that you can go out on the town. But in our case, we can, we've developed this relationship. We have this relationship with our foster niece, so she can come over and allow her foster mom to go out and to go to meetings or stay late at work, and so we're delighted that we can do that. How else can folks help a foster family?
There's a number of ways, and thanks for asking. I really focused on that in the book Faith and Foster Care. And in fact, the sequel comes out in February called The Church and Foster Care. And it is my belief that the next mission field for today's faith-based organizations, whatever faith it might be, that mission field is in our own backyards, in every single community. There's roughly 500,000 kids in foster care in America. Not enough homes. There are roughly 300,000 children who are victims of human trafficking in our nation, and again in every community. And while not everybody can be a foster parent, everybody can help in some way, including faith-based organizations. They can be tutors. They can be mentors. They can provide school supplies. They can provide clothing. When it's time for birthdays or holidays for these children, they can help the foster parents with gifts. Faith-based organizations are a wonderful place to host a clothes closet, if you will, or maybe to host foster parent support group meetings. They can help out with meals for foster parents. They can have book bags stuffed with new pajamas and clothing and teddy bears when the kids are placed into care initially. Those are just a few things that people can do to help the children right there in their own community. And what I want to point out is this. When someone helps these children in this way, including the faith-based organizations, they're not just helping the child. They're not just helping the foster parent. They're also helping that birth parent who is suffering in their own way. You know, these birth parents may have committed heinous crimes against these children. At the same time, they're also most likely hurting themselves in some way, struggling with their own trauma, struggling with their own anxiety, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. 2 of the 3 kids I've adopted are 3rd generation foster care, which means their parents and their grandparents were also in foster care, and the cycle just repeated itself because they never got the healing or the help that they needed.
Mm-hmm. And I think at the same time we're also helping our community because these human beings are part of our community.
Right.
And they're hurting. And they're going to keep on hurting until someone comes by and helps them heal.
That's right. And that's a great point. When a child ages out of foster care, in some states it's 18, in other states it may be 21. But when they age out, when they leave the system, the statistics for them are so grim. 55% of them will drop out of school. 65% of them will end up homeless. 75% of them will spend some time in jail very quickly. So when we help these children, we help these youth, we help to reduce the homeless rate, the crime rate. We bring up the graduation rate. So you're absolutely right. You help the whole community.
You know, I want to talk a little bit more about the faith-based and this being a great mission field. But also I don't want it to slip my mind. You know, you talked about buying a book bag for kids filled with some supplies or with pajamas or things like that. That can seem so trivial, but so many of these kids, they bounce from home to home.
They do.
And a lot of them, I'd probably say the majority of them, the way that they take the little belongings that they have from one place to another is in a green plastic garbage bag.
Right.
And a thing like a book bag, a thing like a backpack or a small suitcase that they can call their own, really must give the kids that really needed dignity.
Right. It gives them dignity. It gives them a sense of pride. It reminds them that they do matter. Because, can you imagine a black plastic bag is all they have for their possessions? What does that say about them? Mm-hmm. It tells them this message, that they're garbage, that they're worthless. So we try to make sure that each child who leaves our home has a brand new suitcase filled with all of their things. Yeah. So you're right. When a child is placed into foster care, that backpack filled with toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorants, hygiene, pajamas, teddy bears, books, whatever it may be. Yeah, that's a great gift that tells them immediately, hey, you are important and you are valued.
Mm-hmm. You know, I wanted to go back and touch on this faith in foster care and the church in foster care because my wife and I, we lead a ministry to the homeless, and it's been a powerful thing in our lives, and we hope it's meant something to the folks that we minister to, and we're just serving desserts on Friday nights, but the folks there seem to really enjoy it. I want to talk to you about how we can kind of proactively minister to kids who may potentially be future homeless folks, and how we can help them, how we can support them now that they're in foster care, so we can change that cycle and change that their trajectory of life. Before John shares his thoughts about this very important issue, I want to share with you what I think is a really, really fantastic holiday gift for the kid in your life, the curious kid in your life, or maybe this conversation that I'm having with John DeGarmo is inspiring you to want to go out and get a wonderful gift for a curious foster kid that lives in the neighborhood. Well, if you are, Little Passports is a perfect holiday gift for any curious kid of all ages. Little Passports delivers fun-filled packages right to their door every single month with engaging hands-on activities, interactive projects, and unique souvenirs just waiting to be discovered. Little Passport's monthly subscriptions are designed to spark children's curiosity about geography, world culture, or science. From exploring sea creatures in Costa Rica to building a Big Ben like the one in England or making an ancient Greek headpiece, every month is a different adventure that will fuel their imagination and spark their natural curiosity of the world around them. It's the perfect gift for kids ages 3 to 13 this holiday season. Order yours today at littlepassports.com/reading. That's littlepassports.com/reading. So we can change that cycle and change that their trajectory of life.
Well, my wife and I, as I conduct this interview with you, my wife and I are living in a residential home for boys that we both founded. It's called Never Too Late. And we're the house parents right now. And we teach these boys important living skills, important social skills, so that when they do leave, they're prepared for society. They're prepared for life outside. Because some of these children don't come in. They come into care without any type of social skills or living skills. So it's important that we teach those skills to them. But in the faith-based component, as I said earlier, I really believe that this is the next mission field. I have spent a number of summers in Mexico building houses for the homeless. My children have been to Nicaragua and Honduras, and those are all wonderful opportunities. Wonderful opportunities. But I think faith-based organizations need to appreciate the fact that they don't have to look very far. Right in their own backyard, there are children who are suffering, children of God, if you will, who are suffering. So faith-based organizations have this opportunity to heal this child, their birth parents, the foster parents, the whole community, right outside their backyard.
And one of my favorite, and I botch it all the time, but one of my favorite quotes from Mother Teresa, she says it's really easy to care for someone on the other side of the world. It's harder sometimes for us to care for the suffering people who are in our families and in our communities.
Oh, absolutely. For me, it's I cling to a scripture verse, it's Matthew 25:35, which says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was naked, and you gave me clothing." To me, that's these children. That's these children who live right where I live.
And, so much, we hear so much, and this certainly is not a political show by any means, but so many people are talking about being pro-life, and I think that's wonderful, but we need to be pro-life all the time. We need to be pro the kids who are living with us and in need right at this moment.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think children need to hear three things every day. They need to hear someone appreciate them in some way. Like, hey, I appreciate you did a great job with doing the dishes, or I'm really grateful for you helping feed the dog. They need to hear thank you. Thank you so much for helping with this. And then they also need to hear this. They need to hear that someone loves them. I love you. They need to hear those three things every day. They're appreciated, they're thanked, and they love them. And that, we all need to hear that, not just little babies, but up until high school and beyond. I need to hear those things myself, 50 years of age.
And I got a few years on you, and I need to hear it myself. You brought up that idea of thanks and being thankful, and this is being published right around Thanksgiving time, and I wanted to share this message at Thanksgiving time because we spend Thanksgiving and we are thankful for what we have, and then so many of us run out at midnight to get in line or to body check someone out of the way so we can get that latest piece of technology that might be on sale $20 cheaper. I want to challenge folks to really be thankful this year and to make a commitment to really show the appreciation for what they have by sharing some of what they have with foster kids who have nothing.
Nothing is right. Nothing is right. So many times they come with just the clothes on their back. I don't know how many kids have come to my house with only that, and only the clothes on their back, with shoes that are way too small and ripped, with jackets that are clothing stapled together. in our community, in our nation, which we say is the greatest nation in the world, yet we have children who are going to school with clothes stapled together, who are waking up hungry in the morning, and that's in our communities. So when we help these children in foster care, we're helping that. And, for me, you said the time of Thanksgiving. I am so thankful to have the opportunity to help these children every single day of my life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To give back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's, we don't do good deeds to feel good about ourselves or to get a attaboy. But I have to tell you, I just keep going back to this, and I've mentioned her so many times. I am so very grateful for the foster kid that's in my life right now, and I don't know what I would do without her.
Yeah, I agree. As I said earlier, every child's made me a better person in some way that's come through my home, and I consider every child that's come through my home, whether it's adoptive, biological, or foster, as part of my family. I don't see labels. I don't see labels as in regards to foster, adoptive, biological. They're all my children. They're all my family, and I love each one of them unconditionally.
You make a really, really good and important point. One of the things I hear from folks when I've talked to them about fostering or whatever, it's I don't know if I could bond with that kid. And I think you hit it on the head. When these kids come into your home, you make a choice to love them and to make them part of your family.
I hear this, and foster parents across the nation hear this. I don't think I could do what you do because it would hurt too much to give the kids back. I might become too attached. And my response is always the same. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. Your heart is supposed to hurt. You're supposed to grieve. You're supposed to cry when these kids leave your home, because that means you've given that child what they need more than anything else. Children in foster care need stability and they need security, but what they need more than anything else is someone to love them with all their heart, unconditionally. So when they leave, a part of our hearts break, but that means we've given them what they need, someone to love them. And then we might be, as foster parents, we might be the first person who has ever loved them in that fashion. So what a wonderful gift that we can give with them that they'll take with them for the rest of their life. Somebody loved me at some point.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you've written many books on the subject, and they're not kid books. They're not books that we're going to sit down and cuddle up with our kids on the couch and read aloud to. But is there one of your books that you think would be appropriate for a teenager and parent to kind of co-read and to sit down and talk about?
No, thanks for asking. So, I actually do have a children's book called A Different Home, a new foster child story. It's a book for children in foster care to have read to them by a caregiver, a foster parent, or someone like yourself to help answer some of their questions and ease some of their anxieties. It's a beautifully illustrated book. But for those teenagers, I used to work in a school setting, and I found that so many of my students, and I never encouraged it, but they all wanted to read my book, Fostering Love, One Foster Parent's Journey. It was a very frank, honest book. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I explained it was a memoir, my first 10 years as a foster parent. There's lots of humor, lots of sadness, full of the challenges, the griefs, the joys, the sorrows, the adventures of being a foster dad. And I think that's a book that both teenager and parent would enjoy. I wanted to write something that said, this is what it's like being a foster parent.
Now, I think I stepped on you when you were telling us the name of your children's book. So remind everybody that name.
Oh, thanks for asking. A Different Home, a new foster child's story. And I wrote that book because when a child's placed into care, they have these questions. They're scared. It's a time of fear. No child wants to be placed in foster care. It's scary for them because we're strangers. So they have questions like, why am I here? When do I go home? When do I see mommy next? And then so many times they cry themselves to sleep because they're in a stranger home. And my norm, I can provide all the stability and security for these children, but those first few nights, they're confused, they're scared, they're worried. They may think it's their own fault. They might think that mommy no longer loves them. So this book, this beautifully illustrated book, is designed again for them to have read to them to answer their questions.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Great way to make sure that you don't miss a moment of Reading with Your Kids is to subscribe to the show. We love the iHeartRadio app. We love GoodPod, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We love all the great platforms you can find Reading with Your Kids on. In fact, if you can find a podcast platform that we are not on, please let us know because we're just about everywhere. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on X. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. We'd also love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Natasha Tripplett. Please be sure to check out Planted with Love. Also want to thank Dr. John DeGarmo. It's been a while since Dr. John's been on the show. Time for us to get him back. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.